It's my pleasure to introduce Lily Tang Williams. Lily grew up in communist China during Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution. She was a member of the infamous Red Guard before she moved to America over 30 years ago. Today, she highlights similarities between China's Cultural Revolution and the current culture war in the United States, speaking out against the dangers of critical race theory and other radical leftist ideas that have seeped into the American mainstream. She's contributed her opinion articles to National Review, Town Hall, The Epoch Times, Union Leader, and the Concord Monitor. She's also appeared on Fox News, John Stossel, Joe Page's show, many other shows and podcasts. Lily is on the Speakers Bureau of Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. She's been speaking to students in middle schools, high schools, and colleges in the past 4 years across the country. You can follow her on Twitter at Lily4, that's the number 4, Liberty. On YouTube, you can find her, she's Lily Tang Williams. And on Facebook, she's Lily for Liberty. We'll put the links to all that stuff in the show notes below. Lily, welcome to Deprogrammed.
Well, thank you for having me. Nice to see you both here with me. It'll be fun to have a conversation.
It will be fun.
It was fun to mix it up with you at PorcFest because I was giving a lecture about my experience in social justice, and you had one of the best comments. You came up to the microphone and started talking about your history, your background, and blew us away. I'm just really happy that you had time to come and tell our audience today about your experiences.
Right, because I was very interested in your stories. You said that you were in social justice movement for 20 years. That's a long time. That's a lifetime almost. And I was in China, of course, being indoctrinated by a communist regime and the party. And I left China just right before my 24th birthday. That's also lifetime. It's just so we have something in common, and we finally all wake up, and so this is where we need to kind of have a conversation about how we woke up and what worked, and how we can have a conversation to keep engaging the people who are currently still in this social justice movement, especially young people, because I really see them as some kind of victims of indoctrination. They don't know the history. They don't know how dangerous if we go down this path. And the Marxism, communism is really some kind of ideology. Sounds beautiful. It's like a utopian society. It's just, it never came. And it will actually empower dictators to have full control for every individual's life and throw everybody under the bus, basically. It doesn't matter you support them or not. They are just used to achieve, their agenda. So, I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Maybe can we start by, this might shock you being someone who grew up in the Cultural Revolution in China and knowing how bad it was. But I think many Americans just don't know anything about it. And so when we say, oh, she grew up during the Cultural Revolution, people who know what that means are horrified. But I think most people kind of sounds like, all right, what the heck's the Cultural Revolution? Did you like do some cool art in China? What happened between 1966 and 1976 in China? What is the Cultural Revolution and why should we care about it?
So you are right. It was 10 years from 1966 to 1976. 10 years Cultural Revolution started by Mao, the Chairman Mao Zedong, who was, China's leader. And because his central planning policies prior years before that made a mass famine happen in China. About 20 to 30 million people estimate to be starving to death. So he lost some power within the Communist Party. So he traveled to outside of Beijing, started this Cultural Revolution by using propaganda to purge his political enemies. But he uses a wonderful campaign called Getting Rid of 4 Olds. That means old ideas, old habits, old culture, and old customs of Chinese society. Say that there were some bad influencers in our society. We need to get rid of them. And he act like a typical Marxist, right? So basically he put all Chinese, there's lots of Chinese back then, into two giant groups, oppressor versus oppressed. I'm sure you recognize those two groups. And under oppressor group, then there were 5 black classes. Who was the 5 black classes who were supposed to be oppressors? Basically, the rich, farmers, landlords, capitalists, rightists, bad influencers. Sounds very subjective and arbitrary. Who decides those, right? Basically, anybody who is dissident of the party of Mao can go down to that category, include his enemies within the party. Then 5 red classes supposed to be under oppressed, like me, a child of working poor class, peasants, revolutionary heroes and Communist Party, cadres, official. So you get the Chinese into 10 classes, 5 red, 5 black. And we supposed to hate each other and fight tooth and nail against each other. So I was brainwashed during that time, just those bad people. We need to eliminate them. So some people start to get to know the term now called the struggle sessions, like we saw, because today the critical race theory make people to go to similar sessions where people are separated according to classes, but today is separated by their race. So the struggle sessions were, you normally during the Mao's Cultural Revolution were holding a big, nice, square public opinion place where the red guards will hold their face up to say the down with those 5 black classes and confess, public shame them, make them denounce themselves, and they were born black classes, so the children have to, in order to come to the red side, they need to turn on their families, change their last names to say, I hate my grandparents, I hate my parents because they were rich, they were landlords, they exploited workers and peasants. Those kids basically had to cut ties with their families because otherwise they were born that way unless you change your last name and turn your family under the bus. There are lots of tragic stories happen during that time. It's very sad. And people might not know the Cultural Revolution basically killed 20 million Chinese, murder, torture, re-educational camps. Or some people simply just could not handle the pressure, they killed themselves. My worst nightmare when I was a little girl, I even don't remember my age before elementary school. I was babysitted by my grandmother, and the whole courtyard people shared this 20 feet deep water well. We all share one water well. And there was a guy floating on the top, naked. And people say, come down, see somebody dead, in the water well. Oh my goodness. I was traumatized. I didn't want to talk about it for a long time. And later I found out, years later, even after I come to this country, I asked my uncle, what happened to that guy? Oh, he committed suicide. He was black class. He could not handle the struggle sessions. Even though my grandma went to struggle session too for 1 year because my grandmother married somebody who's supposed to be outlaw country leader. And he was killed by his own man long time ago before, but my grandmother married to a red class worker. But because her dead husband, they want to make her come out to confess, to basically to say, hey, what did your husband do? Did he say anything counter-revolutionary, anti-government? Who killed him? And they went through all the investigation about over a year later. Then finally to say, okay, he was killed by his own man. And so my grandma just feel like, thank goodness, because she was going through struggle sessions for about a year. And if she was classified as a black class because her husband was killed as a counter-revolutionary or traitor or something, my life could be totally changed because I was supposed to be red. But then my grandma could be classified as black. It was very scary. So everybody feel relieved after my grandmother basically got off the hook. That's how bad the situation was. Imagine that. People
can we talk about for a second the fact that a lot of this stuff was not official government channels, but kind of encouraged through Mao and through the CCRG to like get students and people to kind of do a lot of this purging on their own. It wasn't necessarily this is coming down from the top in a very clear way. It was like, we kind of know this is what Mao wants, so we're going to do it ourselves.
Right, because Mao's enemies that time were inside of the Communist Party, inside of the central government. The President Liu become more powerful because after Mao got marginalized, so he wanted to use this cultural revolution. He shut down schools. He used propaganda in newspapers, in art, in music, and every day he got people to sing songs to basically worship him like a god. And they controlled all the press, all the radio stations, all the periodicals, and all the newspapers, and then all the loudspeakers. That time we had loudspeakers on every community ground. It's like a concentration camp, like 6:30 in the morning when I was little. Everybody listen to this loud music, come on, play some red revolutionary songs and say, time to get up, time to go to school. Then ba 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 ba, very loud music and very revolutionary. So you could not even sleep in. Everybody had to work. And so he went through this kind of almost sluggish, channel to also get the people to hate each other, to fight each other. And he told the military to stand down, law enforcement to stand down, urged full-time students, no school to go to, called the Red Guards, urban youth, very naive, ignorant, to be used by him to say, go door to door to search for bad elements, black classes. And looting and burning, fighting, violence was very common. And pretty soon, when Mao, in 2 or 3 years, become like godlike leader, basically made his enemy inside a party, like Mr. Liu got house arrested, quit. And then the Red Guards become violent against each other. Two different groups fighting each other inside the cities. Then Mao sent them away to say, okay, kids, time to go to countryside. Get a re-education by the peasants. Because he finished using them. He sent them to countryside called the Down to the Mountain campaign to be re-educated by peasants so he can focus on his power back to Beijing like a god, and all the young kids sent to countryside for 10 years. My 3 uncles went to countryside, basically do hard manual labor without diploma, without even wife later, were there for 10 years because if you get married with a local girl, you are not allowed to come back to cities. So they all come back like old pensioners. Have nothing. It's very sad generation, very sad.
I've been taking some notes, and I just wanted to see if we could draw up a quick list of some similarities between what you're describing in the Cultural Revolution and social justice ideology currently as it operates in the United States and other parts of the West. And some of the similarities of what you're saying is, I see, and if I'm leaving some out, let me know, but they divide people up into classes or groups. And number 2, they then assign categories to these groups as oppressor or oppressed. They tell you you're in one of these groups. Then they tell the oppressor groups they have to confess. They go to these struggle session things like we see at a lot of the critical race theory things that are happening in workplaces and at churches now, where the oppressor has to confess their privilege. They encourage you to cut ties with your family if you're in the oppressor group, to make public denouncements about your heritage, about whatever that group status is, about something that you as an individual are not responsible for, but they're telling you to accept guilt for that and confess.
Yes.
And then you talked about destroying the 4 olds, destroying what amounts to like tradition, destroying culture, destroying the past. The use of children, social justice ideology uses children in the same way. And then you said they keep people fighting each other and hating each other, which is something I think people could see that in this past year. I think it's getting worse in the United States, the way that we're at each other's throats, which then leads to, like you said, there's a lot of looting, burning, and violence. We've seen that taking place. And then you described how it descended into infighting and these different factions of the Red Guards were fighting. I've seen that happen in social justice groups where they eventually turn on one another. And I think that'll happen here. But the question is, like, how much destruction are they going to commit on the way to it all falling apart, before they get sent to re-education camps themselves, now that they've been useful? Would you add anything? That's a whole list of similarities. Do you think that that's like, that based on what you've said, would you add anything to that? And what are my other question would be, what are the differences? What is different from this and the Cultural Revolution that you went through that makes it hard for us to see it here?
Well, don't forget, defund the police.
Defund the police.
Yeah. Defund the police, because how do you do Cultural Revolution if you had a rule of law, you had the people enforce the laws on the books, and criminals will be checked? They want criminals running wild on the streets so they can do violence, lootings, and burnings. And police were told, stand down. During the Mao's Cultural Revolution, you can basically witness some black class families were tortured to death. Nobody there to save you. Nobody there to hold violent, criminal, thuggish Red Guards leaders accountable. So I was very afraid that when I saw all those similarities you mentioned, not just me, there are lots of Chinese immigrants from mainland China, my generation, also really tell them this is a cultural revolution. But they just don't have that, sometimes opportunity, or they have worries to come out publicly with it. I mean, there are some Chinese moms coming out now to say, stop critical race theory teaching. This is a Mao's Cultural Revolution, except Mao used critical class theory. Basically, class people by economical wealth status and the political ideology, like which loyalty, where you stand. Even some people might actually support the Communist Party and Mao just because they become dissident. They disagree with some policy issues. Then they want to classify them into oppressor class. That means you're going to be eliminated. You're going to go to labor camps. It's very arbitrary, subjective. And I saw that talking of re-educational camps from the left side, either media or even elected, Congress people. It's like, where did they learn those words? Like they want to really become fascist, Marxist in this country. Don't forget that the BLM leaders come out to say, we are trained Marxists.
Yeah.
Who trained them? And how long they've been trained. Then later, of course, she bought 4 houses and with all the donations. So the social justice warriors, young people who are naive, they truly believe maybe they're doing something great. Social justice instead of true justice. So social justice is just another way that they use that to play identity politics.
Yes.
That's typical communist Marxist divide and conquer. It's identity politics. You are not an individual. Now, instead of class theory, we use race theory to divide people by skin color, because even Chinese government knows our country has a weak spot where people will buy into those rhetorics, because we historically had slavery, has racist history, so they play that card to, even after years of civil rights movement, to say, you are still oppressed. People of color, you're still victims, and blame all on white people. It's like I came here as a foreign student in a foreign land, did not even speak English. I never felt discriminated, oppressed. I come here and I worked hard. American people opened their arms to offer help to a stranger. When I first came here as a graduate student, almost 24 years old, I had $100. I stayed in a white neighborhood in Texas, Austin. My sponsor offered me a free place to stay so I could pay my bills and I could clean and cook. So people I work with in graduate school, they offer me, do you need a blanket? Do you need clothes? You need a kitchenware? When I got ready to move out, have my own efficiency apartment. So I feel American people were so warm and welcoming. I mean, how could you convince immigrants like me, lots of them like me, to say America is a systemic racist country? White people are born racist. I mean, my husband I met first night when I came to this country. Thank God.
Wow.
I was blessed. We've been happily married for 31 years, raised 3 young adult children now. And how I'm going to say, my husband's entire white families are racist. How could I say that? They were so welcoming. They were fascinated by me and by my culture, by my just self, by me being a good Chinese native who will, integrate into society and work hard. And I cook them Chinese food too, so they love that. And, I told my husband how to use chopsticks, and he told me all about American values because, my English wasn't good enough, and he taught me a lot of stuff. So because I was so brainwashed in China, I did not have ideology. I was fighting against the Chinese Communist Party bosses in China before I came, but I did not have ideology. So I had to take 20 years of slow learning and waking up with my husband's help. He's a libertarian in heart, so he will tell me about free market economics and the private charity, all those ways to solve society problems, free market capitalism instead of, I always thought, government got to do that, government got to do that. I mean, after I come to this country, I still say the same thing I was taught in China. Government should do this, government should do that.
I was told the same thing, Lily, here in the United States.
Things, right? Yeah, but I learned, there are other solutions. There's also an American values and called individualism. We are not just part of numbers and the robots and collective society and identity politics. We are individuals with individual desires, talent, interest, emotions. We need to be treated like individuals. So I basically took another lifetime, 20 years in this country, to become an independent thinker, 2008. And that was 20 years. I come to this country, and thanks to my husband's help, actually, I did start to read some books he recommended me with my still not very good English,
Can I ask you a question about, there's one other similarity that I see, but maybe I'm wrong, and I want you to tell me. Because I think I view it as important. When I read about the Cultural Revolution, one of the things that I notice is that Mao did not strictly define what Mao Zedong thought was. Like, Chen Boda was the supposed kind of expert on Mao Zedong thought, but and he obviously ran the CCRG, their Cultural Revolution group there. But Mao kind of intentionally held his cards close to his chest and made people guess about what Mao wanted. And that allowed him to be completely arbitrary with respect to who was on the good side and who was on the bad side. And people that you thought were on his side, he would suddenly turn against for some political reason. And he could justify it because there wasn't a clear boundary of like, this is the good thought and this is the bad thought. It was not really clear. And I see social justice, even though there's an apparatus in the US of, whites are oppressive and blah, 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 there also seems to be this vague sense that you might not know what they're going to get excited about next. And when the mob decides this thing matters, you need to fall in line right away. And if you don't, or if you don't predict it correctly, you could end up on the wrong side of the ideology.
Well,
is that analogy not worth making, or is it something that you
have
see?
A good point. It's extremely arbitrary and subjective. And Mao Zedong thought which is basically all summarized articles and slogans he wrote into Little Red Book, Mao's Little Red Book. And today is a Little Red app by the Xi, like Chairman Xi. But when I was little, we had a Little Red Book. And so you will study it, memorize, and chant. But it's all subjective. It can be changed. He's constantly changing. And I think that he's a very thuggish personality, also no heart, no love, no compassion. The largest murderer in the world, he could be a sociopath today. You don't see him actually to even smile to the people who treat him like a god, like trying to kiss his hand to ask him to help with some, they don't even have food to eat. And he just did not even smile. If you read this private life of Chairman Mao by his private doctor in China, and he just, no compassion, no expressions. And I did try to look into some theories about critical race theory, social justice movement, and the same thing. There's no factual data, history, and facts to back up their claim. It's a theory, like the Mao's critical class theory. This is a class critical race theory, but then it's a theory that you're supposed to believe it, and you're supposed to ask questions. It's almost like a religion. That's what the Mao did.
Yes.
You become like a god because, somebody got to follow religion. Lots of people today, our kids grow up without, faith and religion.
Yeah.
But is that horrible to believe in this kind of semi-religious feelings about some theory and all Marxism? Basically, it's Marxism, communism, become your religion. I was indoctrinated by that religion all my life in China. It was so scary to see what's going on today on American soil. That's why I feel like, I got to tell my story. I don't care what people call me. You can call me racist, whatever. It's like, but I got to tell the truth because people don't know history. When I go to school to talk to middle school, high school students, even college students, they really don't know the horrors of Mao's Cultural Revolution. When I told them how many people died, their eyes were huge. More people died under Mao than under Hitler. They were just shocked because every day they were talking about fascists, the fascists. Do you know fascists were socialists, were communists, collectivists, whatever you want to call them? Lots of people died. How come you were anti-fascist? Like some Antifa people claim, but they believe in communists and the Marxists, but they have the same thing. It's like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Dave, I have a question for you about the. You mentioned it's like a religion, and I think I agree with you. It operated very much like a religion for me. What was the attitude in Mao's Cultural Revolution? What was the attitude towards religion, towards any kind of other like religious belief?
Well, first of all, communists will shut down all competition, all other religions. So it doesn't matter. I was raised as Buddhist. If you were Catholic and Christian and Taoist in China, they banned all religions. Okay, the Communist Party and Mao banned all religions in China during the Cultural Revolution. So basically, all the youth, you had nothing to believe unless you're from some educated family. You were raised differently. If you go to government school like I did, from 7 until Mao died, I was 12. You had no other religion. Mao was your God. Communism was your religion. Otherwise, you could not read. You could not wear Mao's red scarf. You could not join the Red Guard. You could not become a Communist Youth member and Communist Party member because, the communists supposed to be the atheist. You cannot have other gods, but they become your gods. So I say today that if you are white, male, Christian conservatives, and or rich, you're privileged, and you're the oppressor class. But then, how do you explain, for example, rationally? Then how about the poor working white people? some single mothers are very poor, they're white, and they're struggling. It's like, where do you put them? Are they supposed to also come out to apologize for their white privilege? They don't feel like they have any privileges. They're still struggling and trying to work hard to make ends meet. So this kind of basically godless religious feeling they put into young people's head. Even Mao knows young people is like a big piece of white paper. You can draw the best Chinese calligraphy and you can draw the best paintings on a white piece of paper. That's how he saw the young mind that he could use to follow him to do his communist cultural revolution. But he used them to achieve his purge, his power, his total control, and become like their god. To go through rituals, I had to go through even after violent years, it was over. I went to government school for 6 days a week. You every 15 minutes in the morning, you hold the Mao's little red book and you say like long live Chairman Mao, long live Communist Party, 10,000 years, another 10,000 years. I never challenged that. You cannot challenge that. Is he God or is he human? No, it never occurred to my brain. Should I even ask? No. I was so indoctrinated, so believed him. He would be smiling at me from the clouds. Oh, hi, like, how are you today? Or when we cook Chinese food with burning fire, like with some wood under the big wok, and all of a sudden Mao would be smiling at me and a good child, red child. And then you write a diaries, you confess in your diary, I was a red child. I shouldn't confess, right? No, everybody got to write diary. They asked you to confess if you had any incorrect thought and encourage you to talk to Chairman Mao. By confess, also encourage you to turn on your neighbors, your families. Have you heard anybody say something not supposed to? Do you know their private thoughts? We're extremely political, tight, censored, massive civilian state, and you cannot hide. Mao said politics is in our life every day. You got to talk about it every hour, every minute, every second. Even when you sleep, you're supposed to talk to Chairman Mao. That's religion or not religion, right?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually not talking enough about Chairman Mao and the revolution was considered evidence that you were counter-revolutionary. Just like silence was considered
no, you cannot be silent.
Evidence, right?
That's why when I heard silence, I was like, oh. You know what? You cannot reserve your judgment. You have to be actively come out to make your opinions well known, because everybody's supposed to chant. Remember, people got harassed in the restaurant. They hold their face like that.
Yes.
Say it. If you cannot just say, can I just be quiet? Can I just be not political? No. Everybody has to be political every single day and hour. Think about what kind of life worth living like that. You cannot even have downtime anymore. Comedy shows are censored. You cannot mock some people, or you cannot talk incorrectly because you will get canceled. They want to cancel everybody. When you have no more free speech, no more free minds, then you are no longer free people. You are enslaved. That the head you carry on your shoulders no longer belongs to you. Some people even self-censor now. Oh, I should not say that. Oh, I should not think like that.
Yes.
Sorry,
yes.
I'm wrong. It's crazy. It's exactly what happened during his cultural revolution. Because I went through the entire process myself. When I saw Mao died when I was 12, that's my beginning of the awakening process to say, oh, he died. So that means he was human. And I started to question. I had a little brain left to say, well, somebody lied to me. Somebody lied to my entire generation, entire Chinese people population. And that's when I start my lifelong process of awakening. And I hope people don't have to go through that.
Lily, I have a question. That to me is I think that's one of the big differences that makes it a little hard to help people see what this is here in the United States, is that there is no one charismatic leader. Like there is no Mao. There's not like one person who's pushing this here that we can look to and say, that's the infallible creator of this belief system. And so much like when we talk about, we also compare the social justice ideology to a cult. And again, there's no one cult leader. So I think it makes it hard for people to see what it really is, because they think that you need that one person who's at the top of it, that one bad guy that you can identify and take him down, and that'll take the ideology down. But that's not the way this operates this time in the United States. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there was no single Mao-like leader and to lead this social justice cancel culture movement, but there were thousands little Mao. You know, you can say, hey, there are people who are in radical left. They could be elected representatives. They could be the big tech companies. Who knows those people are who want to cancel you if you don't even use their language. You post something you're not supposed to post. And it could be socialists and the Marxists who really wanted to redistribute wealth. They even don't recognize equity is Marxist term. So even though you don't have one supreme leader above this movement, but there were lots of people just like him is controlling the narratives, talking points. Look at Mao's tactics. He used propaganda machines, all the press, all the media, all the school systems to his advantage. Then he also used thuggish behavior to threaten people, lock them up, torture to death, divide you, and make you come out to feel like you have to be actively apologizing to public, either be shamed or you go shame somebody else. It's this constant struggle and between different groups, and then in the politics, it's all very similar tactic. So the tactic is very thuggish way to forcefully divide people without any rational thinking, facts and data, and force that and you're not allowed to ask questions. You got to obey. You know, you saw that during last year's lockdowns. The summer months of looting and burning and the violence. You're not supposed to ask questions. You just have to obey. And now when they say you got to be loud, be active anti-racist now. So if you work for some work companies, you must go to training sessions because you have to be actively anti-racist and read the books, even military. That's another common thing I'm really worried about. The military is supposed to be neutral in politics in our country. They swear to protect, defend U.S. Constitution, that means all citizens' constitutional rights. But what are they pushing onto military now? Work, be an active anti-racist, loyalty test, purge. That's why I'm so scared. Other people don't feel the urgency, intensity, what could happen to this country. And now they're going to violate your privacy to force you to take a vaccine, maybe have a vaccine passport, track you, then can go to door to talk to you, so-called talk to you. But what if they go door to door to something else? We could lose our human freedom in this country very fast. But the people, they might not feel the same way I do. So I feel like it's my duty as an American citizen by choice to come out to warn people. Please, we don't want to go down that way. We're all being enslaved.
Yeah. I know that Mao was the single leader in China, but I think when a lot of people hear that, they imagine him being very active and going around and doing all these things that you're talking about. But in fact, Mao didn't really do anything other than give some advice to people. There's an entire apparatus that was doing all of this for him. Even the propaganda. He didn't write the propaganda. He maybe gave some direction once in a while and approved things here and there, but there was an entire propaganda machine that operated not completely independently, but with very little input from Mao. And all of these things happened not because there was one bad guy wandering around in boots punching people. It was because there was an entire apparatus he inspired that was doing all this work for him. And so I think that apparatus exists in the U.S., regardless of whether there's a person behind it.
One person cannot do much. It's the whole system. It's the whole party. There are lots of Communist Party members were on Mao's side. So you get the different groups fighting each other who is going to win. And you have then the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda department was at his fingertip. He used them very effectively to purge his enemies. And every day there were, those articles and radio stations and news come out to basically to defeat his enemies. Of course, he got lots of people similar to him, hardcore communists, who wanted to make him a god because all those people were being critical key positions to share that power. It's great to be an emperor, right? I mean, everybody who under you, who ready to you support you, also become a part of the empire. And, it's a very dangerous. And that's why, I say that most people, you are not part of that political elite class in this country, or 1%, 2%. You are just like me. We're just regular citizens. Why are we believing them and fighting each other and hate each other? I wanted to, basically attack each other. Why? Because you believe in their propaganda, believe in their rhetorics. You lost independent thinking and the fact-checking. You bought into social media every day, gave you notifications about something. It's like I have immunity now. No matter what my iPhone sent to me, I'm suspicious. But lots of young people don't have that immunity. They face them information every day, one-sided. It's really a big problem now. And guess who pressured them to do that? There are lots of people in the social justice movement. You don't know who they are, but there are some big actors and bad actors. And the other one who might be, even Chinese government knows if we just play race card in America, and then we will weaken the society and we will take over the world as number one dominating country in the whole world. Imagine that. Even the Chinese Communist Party knows that Americans' weakness to use by them, and they have a propaganda machine here too. The Communist Party spies and the press, social media influence on YouTube, they're everywhere. They infiltrate our schools for past 15 years. We just got rid of the Confucius Institute, and they still have TikTok. Chinese company track all our young people's data, but they have 80 million followers. It's like, I would not, let any of my kids to download TikTok on their cell phone. So it's of course, the whole system is worked that way very effectively, where lots of Americans are asleep. They just have not wake up yet.
Yeah. And the Soviets actually also knew they had plans to use race as a leverage to tear down the United States in the same way. It's just that the Soviets, they died before their plans could come to fruition. But it's pretty clear that the Chinese Communist Party picked those plans right back up and kind of continued on the path.
Right. I read the Chinese documents. I listen to Chinese news. Some of them come out of China. So I know parties, and sometimes they were speaking Mandarin Chinese, their policies, advisors, professors. They all know how to interfere with the U.S., a civil society, elections, schools, science, technology, Wall Street, media, social media, so they can win without firing one shot. Can you imagine? We lose our country, a free country based on constitution, and got some communist country dominating the whole world. That will be end of human freedom. I'm very scared. Think about that future. That's why we got to speak up and fight now before it's too late.
Lily, what are some of your tips on or advice on how to help people wake up? I get asked that question a lot as someone who left social justice ideology after having been in it for 20 years. And my background, I pushed it in my job, in my career. I did what you talked about. I cut people out of my life if they were not in my ideology. My social media feed, my echo chamber was just social justice people. And I believed that it was good. I believed this was a good belief system, and it did function like a religion for me. I was indoctrinated into it at an elite university when I was, 17, 18, 19 years old. And for me, because I left it after so long, I get that question a lot. How do you wake people up? And I've started trying to answer that question. There's no easy answer, but what advice would you give people? Because we have a lot of people in our audience who want to share their voice, help people in their life, maybe friends or family who are being seduced by some of this social justice ideology. What kind of inspiration or advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, thank you. What you're doing now is through media, you speaking up, and use social media, your YouTube channel to educate people. Mm-hmm. I truly believe most human beings are nice people, and because we all have so much common ground, mm-hmm. and we all want to have good life and pursue self-interest, happiness. It's always the another side. They want to instill hatred into your head because that's how they win and gain their power. So we need to be kind together and to talk to each other with respectful tone and the voice, not lectures and not force them. And so first of all, we got to be respectful and kind. And if you have friends, families have different opinions, but you are already waking up, continue to engage them, have dialogues. And whenever they are ready to talk to you, you invite them to have conversations. Just be there for them and still provide the love, support they need. So they think you are cool. You are still a person, a friend, or a family member. You're not an enemy, or you're not just right wing, not just because you have different opinions. And I always tell people, please don't demonize anybody who is from another side. Most Democrats are good people. They might just not know the history. They might be just trusting government authorities too much. So you have to give them maybe alternative facts and data to think about. But at the beginning, though, before they get out of their brain box, they're not ready to look at your facts and data. They always get information from their source. So just as a person, continue to engage them in their lives and be there ready to help them when they want to have a conversation with you or ask you a question, then you start to, talk to them. And I think we could, let's say people are already awake, but they're afraid. And that's when you have to master your fear. Like I believe there are lots of good people out there, and including teachers. I mean, how are they continue really to violate their conscience and their code of conduct to teach critical race theory? How come you don't see other white people like Pelosi, all those white politicians? Come on now. Did they already denounce themselves as white privileged? And they should call themselves, I am a racist, I have bias or whatever. It's always this hypocritical and stuff they push on regular people, but the political ruling elites, including Hollywood people, they're so righteous, morally right, and we are just, if you love freedom, you have different opinions, then they give you a big name, a hat to wear. You're racist, you're bigot. It's just, lots of people don't agree with that, but they're afraid they can lose their job, career, and they can be called racist. And so they don't want to come out public and speak it. But that's how you lose your freedom and liberties. When you lose a country, destroy the country's moral values and culture, ideas, and even destroy families. It's time for people who know what's going on, but be brave enough to join us to speak up. like you did, Keri. You were not hiding after you woke up. You decided to take this message to the whole country.
Yes, but I will say for anybody who's awake now but afraid, it did take me about 6 months. I was quiet for 6 months after I'd started waking up because I was so scared about what I might lose. Which those things are not, ultimately after those 6 months, I came to a place of understanding that I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't speak up and what we would lose if I don't speak up. And I think people just have to get to that place where they realize the things I'm afraid of losing are nothing compared to what could be lost if I don't speak.
Right. Tell your story. I have a Chinese friend I just met recently. Think about what he could lose. He went to Chinese jail for 7 years, house arrest for another 6 years when he came out. All his family members were hired by party to basically watch over his shoulder. So he finally made it to the United States, and it's 2018, cannot even speak English yet. In this free country, he's continued to speak up, to appear on Chinese program, TVs, writing articles, and the Chinese spies threatening him in this country, America, trying to get him killed, burn his car, and follow his car when he travels around country, threaten him and get his, call him sometimes weird, time to say, shut up or we're going to kill you. And they So think about it. He is risking his life to tell the truth. And I cannot even go home to see my family in China. I don't know what's going to happen to me if I go home or to my family members. We all have to take that risk and choice to say, I'm going to be quiet when I face evil, or I'm going to stand up and fight. Because if you do die someday, live free or die, like the model in New Hampshire, you want to live on your knees, or you're going to lie down flat, let them run you over. Everybody got one life to live. I have done lots of deep thinking since I become publicly anti-communist party and the communism, because I do have an extended big family still live in China. But I already warned my family members, I'm not going to be silenced in this free country. If we lose America, the world will be a very dark place. We have to speak up now because the Communist Party people, the communist Marxists are everywhere. They have infiltrated into Europe, and America still the shining city, on the hill to millions immigrants. Look at Cuba. Cubans were carrying U.S. flag. Hong Kong students were carrying U.S. flag. They want to come to this country, but the left is saying, we are the racist, systemic racist country. Okay, do you want to go to China, Cuba to live there just for 6 months? And we get them come here? Then you will know how, I bet those people go there, live a year, they will come back and kiss American soil when they enter the country.
Lily, thank you so much for that.
That's a great rant.
Really great impact. There's something about in your voice. It's just this great love of freedom and of individualism and of what the United States is supposed to stand for, the principles that we're supposed to stand for, and you being someone who, what is at stake and what could be lost. And I just appreciate you speaking about it so passionately. So thank you.
I cannot help it. My husband said, slow down. When you get so passionate, your English becomes less good. And so I have to slow down a little bit. Because I see this similarity, because I have this ability to tell stories, and because I feel so blessed in this country, I need to give back. And how do I give back as an American citizen? Is to tell the truth. No matter whatever in front of me, whatever threats come in my way, I'm not going to be silenced. I cannot, because I love this country. I still want to get rid of communism in the world because I know what kind of suffering that is. No matter how beautifully they paint a picture for you, if you live in a utopian communist society, it's a big lie. It will never come. You will never come. You don't even have freedom to sing your songs, wear your clothes you like, have a hairstyle you like, and to get married, have kids. You all need a permission even in China today. Remember they had a one-child policy, then 2 children, and now it's 3, and now they follow your period cycle to say time to have 3rd kid. It's all about control your life. You don't belong to yourself. There's no self-ownership. There's no civil liberty. There's no privacy. So I wonder why ACL, you would not come out to condemn all the government policies are violating civil liberties and privacy. I'm calling them out all the time.
Me too.
I put the work for the, civil liberties. And how about the feminists? All the feminists, my body, my choice. Where are you now? When the government trying to force people to do something to their body they don't want to do. Yeah. Don't you think freedom is about free to choose? You believe something is good, trying to convince people to do it. But don't force them with government force. If you don't do it, you might just go to jail, you might not go to school, you might not have your job, you might not travel. It's just insane. So we have to be consistent when it comes to our freedom, And I hope people will learn from my stories that this is a North Star for me. It's our individual liberty. Nothing else matters.